Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of the 2018 horror film, A Quiet Place. Shh. Now, A Quiet Place is a film that I was really looking forward to. I was very surprised by how well put together and how well edited the teaser trailer was. It wasn't one of those teaser trailers that was giving away the entire movie. It reminded me of teaser trailers that I've seen in the past that made it their mission to make you interested in the film, but at the same time not give things away. Give you just enough to get interested into what the film's about. And that's exactly what a trailer is supposed to do. It's supposed to sell you on the movie. And I felt that the teaser trailer for A Quiet Place definitely did that. It helped too that I really liked the concept. I like the idea of the film taking place in a post-apocalyptic future where there are these creatures that are running around and they will get you if you make a certain sound. So if you make a really loud noise, they'll be right on you. I like that concept. I like the fact that it was more of a serious take on something that you've kind of seen in similar movies with creatures that react to sound, like screamers or tremors. And Emily Blunt is a fantastic actress, and I'm a big fan of hers ever since I saw her in Edge of Tomorrow. So her being a part of the cast was also something that really sold me on the movie. I was also curious to see how John Krasinski would do acting-wise in a role like this, as well as what his directorial debut would be like, because this film was his directorial debut. It was the first film that he had ever directed. And I loved how it didn't give away the monsters. It didn't show them once, maybe in the shadows, but you didn't really get a good look at them. So overall, yeah, I was immediately sold on this film, and it skyrocketed up the list of my most anticipated films of 2018. And I am really glad to be sitting here and telling you that it was a resounding success. I loved this movie. It was a very unique and wonderful experience in the theater, despite some of the people who were in the same row as me who didn't like the movie and were, I don't know. I mean, to each their own, but there was this one guy in particular that I honestly thought was a bit obnoxious, and I'll get to that later. But anyway, before I get into this review, before I really dive in deep and really delve deep into this review of A Quiet Place, I want to let people know that if you have heard mixed things about this movie, if you have been or on the fence about it, especially if you were interested in seeing the movie, I'm going to say right off the bat, see it. See this movie in the theater. It's a very unique experience, especially with the way that there's not that much sound. It's a film that relies upon, there's sound, but there's a lot of moments where it's quiet, and there's a lot of moments where you can't really hear any score, and there's not really a lot of dialogue. So it's a very unique film in that regard, and I think it's a very worthwhile experience to see the film in the theater, to be able to experience that with an audience, and to see what the effect is. When you're watching a movie like this, and you realize certain things about the theatrical experience that you'd never realized before. Like how loud somebody's crunching is, or how loud the sound of somebody opening a potato chip bag can be. And it can add to the whole experience. It can add to certain sequences and make them even more harrowing and suspenseful, because if you're waiting for something to happen, and then all of a sudden somebody drops their bottle or something and it rolls down the aisle, it just adds so much to the experience that will definitely be missing if you decide to wait to see this until it comes out on home video or streaming. Also, I want to say this: A Quiet Place may be listed as a horror movie, and I did say it was a horror film at the beginning of this video, and technically it is, but if you ask me, I think A Quiet Place is more of a thriller with heavy dramatic elements, than it is just a straight up horror movie. It does have some horror elements to it. And forgive my cat. Apparently, he does not want to be quiet, which is, it's just perfect. It's just total irony. I'm talking about A Quiet Place, and I got a cat who does not want to be quiet. But anyway, yeah, it's one of those films that it might be listed as a horror movie, or it might have been marketed as a horror film, but it is not a traditional horror film. It is more of a suspense thriller with heavy dramatic elements and a twist of horror. If you were expecting this to be like your traditional horror movie, you were going to be disappointed. And I think a lot of people were expecting that, and that's why a lot of people didn't like the movie. Because it wasn't scary enough, it didn't have any gore, the body count wasn't very high, and they took offense to that. And to be honest, I don't think that's fair to the movie. But that's just how I feel about it. But anyway, let's get started, shall we? I'm going to talk about what I liked about the movie, and then I'm going to talk about what I didn't like about the movie, which was not much. But when I get to that point, I want to let you all know ahead of time that I will be getting into some major spoilers, because I cannot talk about the things that I felt the film could have done differently or could have done better without talking about spoilers. So when it comes to things I really liked about the movie, I definitely want to mention John Krasinski's direction. This is a guy who has never directed before, and it definitely does not show. He does a masterful job setting up certain shots, getting the most out of his environment and his setting, and getting some really great performances out of the actors. And there might have been like a few instances where you can tell that he's kind of a little bit of an amateur, but there wasn't really a lot of that. It was a very surprising and honestly speechless experience. I mean, I don't know, speechless experience is the right word, but it was a very surprising job, well done by Krasinski. He not only directed the film, but he also starred in it too, so it's one of those things where he was pulling double duty, and he also helped write the script, along with Brian Woods and Scott Beck, so this is a guy who was stretching himself thin, but it didn't look like it, and there's a lot of actors who can't do that, can't say the same. So yeah, I was really impressed with his direction, and I really am looking forward to whatever he does next, because this was a really effective and efficient debut. I thought the script, for the most part, did things really well. I liked the fact it didn't give away that much. I liked the fact that it kept things mysterious. I liked the fact that it made you have to pay attention to the film in order to get certain nuggets of information. It's a movie that I feel that could be even better with a second watch, because you're able to realize or see certain things in the background to help clarify certain things that you might have been confused by, or things that you felt that the film was missing. For instance, there's a lot of information that's in the newspaper clippings that are strewn throughout the movie, so pay attention to those. If you haven't seen the film yet, pay attention to those, because it will definitely make the experience a lot more rewarding, and definitely make the experience of watching A Quiet Place a little more satisfying, because some of your questions are going to be answered in the form of those newspaper clippings. I also felt it did a good job with I know some people have had issues with the creatures. I thought it did a good job showing what they were all about, how they didn't just hear everything all at once. They were able to hear things in different frequencies, one at a time. Their entire heads it's a great design of these creatures, where their heads open up like a flower, and they have all these different ears that they can hear out of. And that's why when one part of their head, which is can hear all these different things and does all this stuff, when one part gets overwhelmed by one frequency, and messes up everything else. And that's the ultimate weakness that they find sometime in the film. I'm not going to say what the frequency is, but ultimately that's the weakness. And I thought that was a pretty good touch with the script, showing that these creatures, they can hear all different types of frequencies. I thought that was interesting. I also liked the fact that these characters really had a lot of... I wouldn't say there wasn't a ton of character development with these characters, but there was a lot in the film that made them real, that made them characters that you sympathized with, that made them characters that you really were drawn into and did not want to see die throughout the movie. I felt the film did a really good job with that, and it's really impressive that it was able to do that, considering that there is not a lot of dialogue in this movie. A lot of it's done with sign language. There's subtitles and there's nonverbal cues and things like that. And so, in order the film succeeding in that front of doing a good job and making you care about these characters, that's definitely a big feather in its cap that goes right to the writers. I mean, that feather belongs to the writers, Brian Woods, Scott Beck, and John Krasinski. Now, the writing, though, would not be able to be anywhere near as effective without the performances by the cast. And forgive me for rubbing my nose. Apparently, there's something just irritating me. I don't know what it is. It's like my nose is just itching like crazy right now. But anyway, the cast is... I honestly think this was a film that was perfectly cast. I could not think of any other actors or actresses who would have been better than the ones that starred in this movie. I thought it was perfect casting, and it really did elevate the film to a whole other level with their performances. It's a film that really hinges on its actors in order to have the most impact, and it really does do a bang-up job doing that and having a very powerful impact on the audience. Emily Blunt plays Evelyn Abbott, who's the mother of Reagan, Marcus, and Bo, and the wife of Lee, and she is a very powerful character. And she goes through a lot. She goes through hell and comes out from the other side of hell stronger and more resilient than ever before. John Krasinski plays Lee. He is, in essence, the heart of the film. He's in a lot of ways, the main character. And this is a guy who really is the glue for the entire movie, and also for the story and for the characters and the interactions with him and the relationships with him. And I felt Krasinski did a really good job playing this tragic hero. That's what his character is. He's a tragic hero. Millicent Simmonds, I also thought, did a absolutely amazing job in this as their deaf daughter. And this actress actually is deaf. So that's what makes the performance even more impressive. Noah Jupe was also fine as Marcus Abbott, the oldest son, and Cade Woodward was fine too as a younger son. So these are all actors that worked well together. You bought that they were a family. You bought that these were characters that had been through a lot. And it just makes the experience of watching A Quiet Place just so much more worthwhile when you have these characters that are so well written and so well performed. I also have to give huge kudos to Industrial Light and Magic, who did most of the visual effects for this movie. They really did a absolutely spectacular job with the special effects, especially for a movie that only cost $17 million to make. A Quiet Place didn't cost that much, $17 million budget, and you almost would not really be able to tell when you look at it from an effects standpoint. ILM is always at the cutting edge when it comes to effects, and this film is no exception. I also felt the score by Marco Beltrami was fine. This movie wasn't a film that used the score that much, but when it needed to, it really did resonate. It was a score that was used sparingly, but it definitely did add to certain sequences, made them more suspenseful, and made more emotional scenes even more emotional. Really did amplify the emotions in the particular sequence that the score was in. Without the score, the emotions might not be as strong. So it's not one of his best scores, but I do feel it's a nice compliment. It's a nice complimentary piece to the rest of the film. The cinematography by Charlotte Bruss Christensen I thought was gorgeous. This is a film that took place in a post-apocalyptic universe, but it really didn't really look that blown up or that worn out, because it wasn't like it was a nuclear apocalypse. It was a desolate sort of wasteland sort of atmosphere, but in a world where there were still tons of vegetation, still tons of trees and beautiful scenery. And I felt that the cinematographer Charlotte did a good job showing that amidst all of this chaos. I also felt that she did a really great job working with lighting and things like that. There are particular sequences in this movie that are very reliant upon lighting in order to make them effective, and I thought she did a good job really highlighting the lighting in certain sequences. I also felt the editing by Christopher Telfison, I thought it was excellent. This is a film that has a very tight pace to it. It starts off a little bit slow, but once it gets going, it keeps going. And it gets relentless. It really does become an unrelenting film. And in large part, that's because of the editing. This is a film that could have easily been 2 hours, but it wasn't. It was 95 minutes with the end credits. And I felt that was a perfect pace for this movie. I was really surprised that this film did not dick around, did not spend that much time dragging things out. I really appreciated that. It could have done that. It could have easily done that with like 30 minutes of character development in the beginning or some dead spot in the middle, but it didn't do that. It decided this is enough. It had a simple story. It stuck to that simple story, and I admire that. I thought it was admirable, and I definitely respected that. And so did a lot of audiences and critics. I mean, the movie has gotten a lot of good reviews from critics. I think it deserves it. If you disagree, that's fine. I have no issue with that. But this is one of those rare films where I definitely do agree with the high critical acclaim. And it has earned a really good chunk of money in the box office. $103.2 million on a $17 million budget. That's a success. That's a resounding success for sure. And not, like I said, it's a resounding success for me, but it's also a resounding success for the studio, for Paramount. They've been really looking for a hit for a long time. So it's nice to see Paramount get up off the canvas and deliver with a quality film like A Quiet Place. And I definitely feel that this is a movie that will have some staying power because of how unique it is. Yes, there have been films like this that dealt with sound and creatures who react to it, but not with this particular approach. That's what makes it different. This is more of a serious, dramatic approach to it. It's more similar to something like It Comes at Night than it is to Screamers or Tremors. It's not trying to be a fun movie, and it could have easily went that route, but it's more of a serious film. And it's effective. And it's one of those films where it could have been boring, but it wasn't. I didn't think it was boring. I mean, there were moments in the film where there wasn't a lot happening, but I was on the edge of my seat because the sound editing in this was top notch. If this does not get nominated for Best Sound Editing at the Oscars, it's getting robbed, because this is some of the best sound editing I have heard in a film in a long, long, long time. This film relies upon its sound and its lack of sound to really alienate and disorientate the viewer. And I really do feel that this film achieves that and then some. It really does make it a very disorientating and strange and surreal experience. And that's one of the big reasons why I loved it so much, because it felt like it was just a unique experience in the theater. It was something new. It was something fresh. And I know some people have said things like it's just jump scares and all of this, and I respectfully disagree. I think the film is much more than just jump scares. And I didn't really remember there being that many dumb jump scares in the movie. There were a few, but regardless, even the ones that were there, they didn't really bother me, because I was so engaged in the story. I was so engaged in the characters that if it did some silly jump scare shit, it didn't bother me that much. It did not affect my enjoyment of the film in the slightest, to be honest. Now, trying to think of other things that I can mention real quick when it comes to positives that the film has. I would say like I said, it's a slower paced film, but it's not boring. It's not sluggish. It's not tedious. It takes its time. It starts out with a bang, and then it slows down a little bit, and then it picks up pace and continues at that pace for the rest of the film. At times at times it goes by so fast that you have to catch your breath, and I think that actually works in the film's favor. Now we get to the spoilers section of this review. I don't want to ruin the film for anyone who hasn't seen it, so that's why I'm doing this. This is the spoiler section of the review. This is where I'm talking about the things that I personally didn't like about the film, or I felt it could have done better. And I will let you know when I'm done with this section, so you can skip ahead and see my final thoughts on the movie and get to hear my final rating. But anyway, there really was not a lot of things about A Quiet Place that I felt were not successful or didn't work. But there were a couple things that stood out to me. One in particular is a certain moment in the film that is very powerful and it's very effective, and that is the tragic sacrifice of John Krasinski's character, of Lee. He sacrifices himself to save his kids, and it's a very emotional, powerful scene. And I admit, I cried in the theater watching this scene. But I would have personally rather have seen the film turn the tables. And instead of having another final girl with Emily Blunt's character, with the mother, Evelyn, I would have a final guy. So I would switch the roles. I would switch the demises, so to speak. I would have the mother be the one that does the heroic sacrifice, and have the father live on. That's just my personal preference. And it's, like I said, it's just a little tiny thing that I would have liked to have seen in the movie that I felt could have made it even better. And the reason why is because this is a film that had been playing around with genre conventions, playing around with audiences' expectations from the very beginning. The first 10 minutes, it kills off a kid. Right off the bat, it's playing around with conventions. Right off the bat, it's showing that these monsters, these creatures, they're relentless, and they really don't give a shit about anything other than survival and so on and so forth. Like, they don't show no mercy, they don't show any compassion, all bets are off. And I like that. It's not because I love seeing kids getting killed in movies. I like seeing that in movies because it shows that the script has balls. It shows that it's willing to go there. It's willing to push the boundaries. And it adds so much to the film because it makes the antagonist so much more terrifying. There are some great examples of this in other movies. Alligator, the 1980 film. It makes the alligator even more of a presence when it is shown killing kids. The Blob remake, when it kills that kid, it really shows you that this blob shows no mercy. Scream now while you can still breathe is the film's tagline, and it fits perfectly. The blob will eat anything and everyone, doesn't matter. The blob will eat your kid, it'll eat your grandma, it'll eat your mom, it don't give a shit. And I like the fact that these creatures were in the same boat. They're ruthless, they're relentless. That's why I would have had the roles switched. That's why I would have had the mother do the heroic sacrifice, because that would continue to play upon the structure that was set up in the first 10 minutes of the movie. And the other thing that I felt wasn't quite as good about the film would be its climax. There are some moments where it's effective, but I felt it was cut short. And I think a large part of that is because of the fact that it was $17 million. It had a limited amount of money to work with. And a lot of that probably went into ILM's creature designs. And the designs I thought were really cool. They kind of remind me of the Cloverfield monster, but there's enough differences there that I felt that they were unique enough. And but yeah, the film ends on essentially a cliffhanger with the fate of these characters up in the air, and I don't know if there's going to be a sequel. Regardless, I don't really want to see a sequel. It's been a hit. It's a hit, but I don't really feel this film needs a sequel. And I guess you can use your head and be like, oh, well, they survived in the end. You just make up your own ending where Emily Blunt's character, Evelyn, ends up fending off the creatures with a shotgun and saves her kids. But what happens next after that? And it was just one of those things where I felt it was just a little bit of a letdown in terms of the ending, because it was building up and building up. They finally find a way to kill these creatures, and then it ends. I would have liked to have seen the other two creatures die, and I think that would have made the ending more effective. Would have added a little bit more action to the film as well. It would have definitely been a little bit more of a satisfying conclusion. I also felt that the creatures at times in the film, they showed a little bit too much of them. It was like near the end of the movie, and then it just felt like, oh, we've been hiding the creatures from you for this whole time. Here they are, here they are, here they are. And there were moments where they kind of gave it away. They kind of showed a little bit too much. It would have been nice to kept more of them in the shadows a little bit and kept them a little bit more mysterious. But what we do see, I really like. I love the fact that their heads open up like a flower to hear, and I thought the design of the face was really well done with the teeth. I mean, it reminds me of, you know, in some ways maybe a little bit of a xenomorph, but honestly it reminded me more of that creature from Split Second or Venom or something like that. But yeah, it would have been nice to have just kind of played around with things a little bit more in terms of hiding them and keeping them in the shadows. But yeah, other than those things, I didn't really have any issues with the movie. And that's my spoiler section. For those of you who are now joining me, this is my final thoughts on the film. I'm not used to doing spoilers and not spoiler sections in these reviews, so forgive me. It's all new to me, so that's why it's kind of an awkward transition. But anyway, yeah, there were a few things I didn't like about the movie, but not very many, because overall I was really enthralled, really captivated, and just really in love with A Quiet Place. I thought this movie was a loud, proud, and just absolutely wonderful experience. And there were so many things about it that just were excellent. And it's one of those movies that really was a film that was not a disappointment. And I'm really glad, because I was really looking forward to this, and it did not disappoint. And it's another film that's giving me hope for cinema going forward, because yes, this isn't 100% original, but there's enough original things in this. There's enough unique things in this that make it worth your while and make it something that I feel will resonate with audiences for years to come. And I really don't know what else to say about the film, except if I were to rate it out of 5 stars, and I would give Quiet Place 4.5 out of 5 stars. Anyway, thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you later. See ya.